welcome, Mr. From. I'm here with you today to take you on microeconomics as we continue with it. Today we are covering the part that we skipped or that we left behind on the perfect market. And then we are starting the imperfect market. Under imperfect market, we will be doing the monopoly. So please join me. Let's see what we have for you here on the book. So these are the lesson objectives. So this lesson will help you as a learner to understand the following: the long run equilibrium for the perfect market, profit maximization for the perfect market, types and examples of monopolies, the characteristics of monopoly, monopoly costs and revenues, equilibrium positions for the monopolies. These are the main objectives or lesson objectives for this lesson for the day. It is believed that you already know the following as for your content in markets. You know the perfect market conditions and the market structure that was covered on our last week presentation. So this lesson, we are reflecting back. We are covering what was not covered on the previous lesson on the perfect market. So today we'll be taking on the long run equilibrium for the perfect market, as well as the profit maximization under the perfect market, using both MR and MC, as well as TR and TC. So the perfect market, long run equilibrium. So as we know that a long run is a period that is too long for all factors of production to be flexible. In the long run, all inputs are flexible, they can change. None of them is fixed. And then no factor of production is fixed, which allows even new firms to enter the market. So in the long run, new firms can enter the market because remember, under perfect market, the entry is free. So in the long run, it is even easy for new firms to enter the market. This allows supplier to expand or decrease their output as deemed necessary. So any supplier that is existing within the market have a choice to increase or decrease his or her output within the market based on the conditions. So in the long run, existing firms make normal profit where their average costs are equal to average revenues, or total cost equals to total revenues. So in the long run, we normally say firms under the perfect market make the normal profit. Why do they make normal profit? They make normal profit because the competition within the market increases. As new firms enter the market share decreases for existing firms. So as a result, as the market share decreases, what happens there? The decrease in market share results in existing firms not making those profits they used to make before. So as they share consumers between themselves and new firms that have just entered the market, profits will be reduced, and then that will lead to the firms that are existing to make the normal profit. That is the condition where total revenues are equal to total cost, or average revenues are equal to average cost of doing the business. The end of new businesses result to decrease in market share. Like I said, if ever businesses are entering the market share or number of consumers each firm is having, they decrease. So for the existing firms, which decreases, they are stable. So as number of consumers decrease from existing firms going to the new firm that have just entered the market, then that leads to the reduced profits for existing businesses. Then they find themselves making the normal profit. So this is the normal profit for the firm under the perfect market in the long run. So we have our vertical and horizontal axis, labeling our axis. Remember, it's very important that when you draw the graph, first you have a heading, number two, you draw your axis, number three, you label your axis, because they work a mark combination of these costs and revenue. They give you 1 mark in the assessment. Then you have your revenue curve labeled as average revenue equal to marginal revenue equal to demand. Then there's a price in there, it's equal to the price, which is 45 Rand. And then we have our marginal cost. Remember our MC as a night shape. And then we connect our profit maximization output. And then units are equals to 150 in there, or the output is 150. There is a point which is very important where the marginal revenue equals to the marginal cost. That will be shown right now. Then we have our what you call our average cost, which is very important for us to determine if the firm is making a profit or a loss or a normal profit. Then that's a long run average cost, and then that's a long run marginal cost. So look, if marginal revenue is equal to this long run marginal cost, the firm maximizes its profit in there. We call that E a profit maximization point. So the graph is complete now. There is zero because all units begin at zero. So the graph is complete now. So what should be done? You need to be able to interpret your graph. It is very important that you interpret. Remember, the interpretation is based on what has been drawn on the graph. You don't provide information that is not existing on the graph. You provide information that is available on the graph. So how do you do? Let's see now. The basic interpretation for the graph. Then the same graph comes back as it is. And then there we interpret the graph. So normally, this is just the definition, is not the part of the interpretation. We know that normal profit refers to minimum earning that prevent the firm from leaving the market, because the firm in there is breaking even, is not making a profit, neither a loss. So it is earned when average revenue is equal to average cost, or total cost equals to total revenue. So the long run marginal cost, LMC, intersect the long run average cost at its minimum or lowest point. So the AC or LAC always intersect with LMC, long run marginal cost, at its lowest point. So at the minimum point of LAC, then it intersects long run marginal cost. And then point E is the profit maximization point. We know that it's been discussed repeatedly, where MR equals to MC, where marginal revenue equals to marginal cost. Then we have what we call the profit maximization point. And then 45, which is the price here, is the profit maximization price. That is the price that the firm should be charging in order to maximize its profit. And then 150, which are this unit, is the profit maximization output. That means the firm should produce 150 units in order to maximize its profits. And then the lowest point of long run average cost lies along the average revenue, which indicates normal profit. So along here, we can see that the costs are turning along the AR curve. So that means AC, LAC, and AR are all equal at this point that I've just indicated. So that means our costs are equal to 45, our revenues are equal to 45. Then the firm in that case is not making a profit, neither a loss. Then you must be able to calculate your profit or your economic loss. So let's see, the normal profit equals to average revenue minus long run average cost times the quantity. Then we substitute this 45, which is our revenues, minus this 45, which is our cost, because our costs are turning along here, so they are both equal, times it, and then multiply by 150. And that gives us 6,750. So because we'll say 0 times 6,750 equals to 0. Or if we say the other way around, we can say TR minus TC. As we do that, we get to substitute, and then we get our answer. Then TR minus TC, then AR, open the bracket, AR times Q, close the bracket, minus, open the bracket, long run average cost times quantity. And then you substitute 6,750 minus 6,750 equals to 0. Then the firm is not making a profit or a loss. That is known as the normal profit. So this is the long run equilibrium for the firm under the perfect market. It makes what you call the normal profit, or it breaks even. Then now the profit maximization, the other part that will be discussed in this lesson. So the profit maximization simply occurs if marginal revenues are equal to marginal cost, or total revenues are equal to total cost. So we use two methods to show the profit maximization, on how or under which condition will the firm maximize its profit. The individual firm is responsible for choosing the best output it can produce at the given price in order to maximize profit. Remember, the firm is a price taker. Therefore, given the price, the firm is only responsible to choose the price, or to choose the output that it's supposed to produce in order to maximize its profit. But the price is given. The firm is a price taker, so it does not determine any price, but it chooses its own output that will be useful for it to maximize its profit. So if the firm is producing below the profit maximization point, then the firm will not be able to maximize its profit. But if the firm produces on the profit maximization point, the firm will maximize. So it is unnecessary basically for the firm to produce above or beyond profit maximization point, because the firm has already maximized its profit. Therefore, producing beyond or above the profit maximization point is not necessary for the firm or the business. So this is the graph indicating profit maximization. In this case, we use the effect of marginal revenue and marginal cost when they are equal. So given the table here, we have the quantity, the price, marginal revenue, and then marginal cost and profit or a loss. So in this side, we indicate if the firm is making a profit or a loss. So let's see here. In quantity number one, the marginal revenue equals to 40 and marginal cost equals to 10. This means the firm is making the profit because revenues are above cost of doing the business. Quantity number two, or output number two, revenues are equals to 40 and costs are equals to 20. Still, the firm is making a supernormal profit. It's not making any economic loss in this case. And then quantity number three, the revenues for the business, so marginal revenues equals to 40, and then marginal costs are equals to 30. The firm still enjoys supernormal profit in this case. And then in quantity number four, or output number four, revenues for the business are equals to 40, and the cost for the business are equals to 40. So in this case, revenues are equals to cost. Therefore, the firm is breaking even. So the firm is making a normal profit, is not making profit, neither a loss. And then in quantity number five, the firm starts to make economic loss because our revenues are equals to 40 and our costs are equals to 50. Then marginal cost exceed marginal revenue. Therefore, the firm is not making a profit, but it's making economic loss because we can see it's negative 10 in there. And then quantity number six, revenues are equals to 40 and marginal costs are equals to 60. Therefore, the profit in this case, economic loss continues in there because costs are still more than revenues. So let's see it drawn graphically because this was just information to be plotted on the graph. And then these are our revenues. So that means anything below D equals to AR equals to MR will mean costs are lower than revenues. And then anything above will mean costs are above revenues. The firm is starting to make economic loss in there. Let's see. Costs are equals to 50, revenues are equals to 5. And then we continue on the last point in there. That's when our costs are the highest now. Our costs are equals to 60, and then our revenues remain at 40. So the firm is making economic loss. But at this point, point E, we call this one the profit maximization point. Let's see. Any point below point E going down there indicates supernormal profit because average revenues are more than average cost. And then this point along here indicates the normal profit because average cost, average revenues are equals to our average cost or equals to our marginal cost. And then as we go up there, what happens? Any point above equilibrium means economic loss because our costs are above our revenues. Our revenues remain fixed at 40, but our costs keep on increasing. So now they are above our revenues. Therefore, the firm is making economic loss in there. Then it comes in loss because AR is above, because AR is lower than AC or AC is greater than AR. So AC is more than AR. So the firm in here makes what we call an economic loss. And then we continue. Now we maximize profit using total revenues and total cost. Again, we are given some figures here. You can see our total revenue is along here, total cost is along. This determines if the firm is making a profit or a loss. Points are given. In this case, we simply look at the total cost and total revenue. Then that is our total revenue being upward sloping. And then that is our total cost. So let's see what happens. There are 2 points in here where our revenues are equal to cost. You can see this point here indicates our revenues are equal to cost. That is quantity number 2. We can see there it goes. Revenues are equal to 80 and costs are equal to 80. And then we have the third point, quantity number 3, where our quantity number 3 indicates that they are not equal now in this case. What happened? Revenues are equals to 120 and costs are equals to 100. So the firm is making a profit in there. And then the third point simply indicates quantity number 4. Our revenues are equals to what? Are equals to 160, our costs are equals to 130. And then in there again, the firm is still making what you call a profit in this case because our revenue is still more than the cost. And then we go further, quantity number 5, which is here. Our revenues are equals to 200. Our costs are equals to 200. That means now the firm is not making a profit, neither a loss, because they are both equal at this point. This is the point here. And then our last unit number 6, or quantity number 6, our revenues are equals to 240. Our costs are equals to 6. The firm is making economic loss here because total revenues are lower than total cost. At this point, the firm is making what you call the economic loss. And then at which point does the firm maximize its profit? So the profit is maximized where the gap or the distance between total cost and total revenue is the widest, is the biggest. So this point here, at quantity number 4, the firm is maximizing its profits because you can see the gap is too big or is the widest between what you call total cost and the total revenue. So we call this the profit maximization point for the firm using total revenues and total cost. So it is maximized at the point where the distance or the gap between total cost and total revenue is the widest or is the biggest. You can see this gap here is the widest here. So the firm is maximizing its profit in this point. There you go. The profit maximization point is achieved in output number 4. So maximizing profit, we can use MR and MC. We can also use TC and TR. It is very important that we are able to draw those graphs giving information. And then we move to the log equilibrium position. Still, if ever firms are entering the market, what happens? If new firms are able to enter the market within the perfect market committee, what happens? The supply within the market will always increase because there are many firms that are entering the market to compete. So the supply within the market will increase on the first graph. And then on the second graph, existing firms that have been there will find themselves reducing the supply or producing less because they are facing higher competition. The increase in competition within the perfect market results to firms not supplying the large quantity as individuals, but the market itself will supply the large quantity because there are many firms that are competing to produce the similar product in the market. So, perfect market is characterized by the freedom of entry and exit. So, firms are free to enter the market. As a result, new firms will always be free to enter the market, which will lead to the increase in output within the market or the industry. But there will be a decrease in output per individual firm because competition will have increased. New entrants are always attracted by supernormal profits. If ever existing firms are enjoying supernormal profit within the perfect market, new firms are always motivated to enter and compete within the market, which compromises profits by existing firms because that stretches competition even further and results in existing firms producing less goods within the market. So supernormal profits earned by existing firms serves as incentive. So if ever existing firms are making supernormal profit, those new firms find it as an incentive to enter the market and compete because they are also willing to come in and reap profit that are enjoyed by existing firms. As new entrants access the market supply increase. Like I've said, if ever there are many firms that are coming into the market supply will always increase. So that will lead to the shift of the supply curve for the market or the industry to the right, indicating the increase in supply for the market. This results to the loss of market share by existing firms. So existing firms will find themselves losing their consumers to new firms because now the competition is too high. They then produce less due to higher competition. So the output size per individual firm that have been existing will be lower. So we will see on the graph equilibrium position moving from higher to lower. So that will be indicating that the firm is no longer enjoying what you call the supernormal profit, but the firm will enjoy a normal profit because in that case, it will be producing less. That is the long run equilibrium for the firm under the perfect market. So it will be indicated graphically. So we have our original points on the graph. P is the original price, then is taken here. That is our supply and our original demand. Then you have equilibrium. where demand meets the supply. And then the firm have taken the price. You see the horizontal demand curve, D equal to AR equals to MR. And then there is E, where MC or marginal cost equals to marginal revenue. So what happens? New firms enter the market. As new firms come in large numbers to enter the market, what will happen in the market or the industry? The supply for the industry will increase, meaning the supply curve will shift from left to the right. There you see supply curve in there shifting. And then we connect, there will be a new equilibrium in there, because if ever there is more supply of goods within the market, there will be lower prices. So we see prices are declining from P to P1 down there, and the quantity supply increases from Q to Q1. And then what will happen? Remember, the firm is the price taker. So the firm or individual firm decide need to take the price that has been determined. So let's say the firm taking the price, or that is the new equilibrium, that is P1, and then the firm takes the price in there with the new red line. So the firm will take P1 as it is, because the firm, remember, is the price taker, cannot choose, does not have an option over the price, but is simply to take the price given by the market or the industry, defined by market forces. And then you see this P is taken by the firm this side, and then what happens? There you go. We have our what you call the second equilibrium. Initially, we had the original equilibrium in there, and then now we have the new equilibrium. Look at our average cost. Our average cost curve is just turning along the new D1 equals to AR equals to MR1. So if it turns along, that means now this firm is making what you call, is making the normal profit, because MR equals to, it's making normal profit because AR equals to AC. So this is the normal profit. So there is the new equilibrium in there provided, which should be E1. Then you connect our quantity, and then that is the new equilibrium by the firm. So if you can check, original equilibrium was up there on the original E, but when new firms entered the market in large numbers, it resulted to the existing firms no longer enjoying the supernormal profit, but making the normal profit because of the increased competition. So if we keep on saying in the long run, the perfect market enjoys what we call a normal profit, this is the situation. This is the normal profit, indicating that in the long run, the firm will enjoy normal profit due to the fact that competition have increased in the long run. Since all of inputs are flexible, new firms are able to enter the market and compete. That leads to market share or consumers being lost from existing firms to new firms, and then the profits will be reduced on existing firms. Then firms will be making a normal profit on the situation where AR equals to AC. You can see AR here is just along, is equals to AC. It is turning along. So the firm is making what we call a normal profit. Then the graph is explained. So the same graph is back. Then let's see. The intersection of S and D creates equilibrium point, E. So we can see there is E, these are original points. And then equilibrium price is P, and then equilibrium quantity is Q on the original points. And then the same thing applies. Individual firm take the price, which is P, along D equal to AR equals to MR. And then profits attract new firms. As profits attract new firms to enter the market, the end of new firms increases market supply. You can see the market supply increasing from original S to S1. There is an arrow indicated. And then the quantity supply is increasing from Q to Q1, which decreases the price concurring with the law of supply. And then P1 and equilibrium quantity is Q1. So we have P1 in there as a price, and we have what we call the Q1 in there as the new quantity. They are both the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity, which is new. And then individual firm take the price at P1. This P1 is taken by the firm straight up there along. Then we have D1 equal to AR1 equal to MR1. And then at P1, existing individual firm makes a normal profit. So at P1 here, the firm is making normal profit because AR equals to AC. You can see they are all equal here. The quantity by firms decreases to Q1 due to high competition. So the quantity by firms decreases from Q to Q1. It is decreasing because there are many firms now that are producing the same product in the market. So as the competition increases, individual firm will decrease its own output due to the fact that commission is too high. It cannot afford to supply as much as it used to supply before. Then the quantity declines from Q to Q1, going together with the new equilibrium, which move from E to E1. Therefore, the firm is making what you call a normal profit in the long run. And then, what if other firms are exiting the market? If other firms are exiting the market now, that will lead to the lower supply within the market or within the industry. If other firms are leaving the market, the supply for the industry will decrease, which will lead to firms within the market enjoying profit because now the competition have declined due to the decrease in what? In number of firms that are exiting because they are no longer enjoying what you call a supernormal profit. They enjoy normal profit, so they exit the market. As they exit the market supply declines. So the perfect market freedom of exit result to existing firms leaving the market. So they happen to leave the market if they are no longer getting profits. This has a negative impact on the market supply because the market supply declines. So the output by the market will always decrease if firms are leaving the market. This result to greater output by remaining firms. So as what you call as existing firms are exiting because they are no longer enjoying profits, the remaining firms will be producing more goods now. They will be having more output as individuals under individual firm because the commission has declined. As a result, they find themselves enjoying profit. Let's see. As remaining firms increase its output, it enjoys supernormal profit because average revenues exceed average cost, or AR is greater than AC. So if existing firms are leaving, new firms are entering, or some firms that are remaining will be having much capacity to produce because commission has been reduced. As a result, they will find themselves supplying more within this kind of the firm as individual, but the market supply will decrease because firms are decreasing, commission is decreasing, then market supply will decrease. That will be indicated graphically. Let's see, we have original points already plotted here. And then the market supply will decrease because firms are leaving the market. They are exiting. So there's exit of firms. As they exit, the market supply will decrease from S to S1. There is S1 indicating the decline in supply. And then we are connecting the new equilibrium in there. So the price is P1 and the quantity is Q1. That is the new equilibrium, which is E1. Remember, the firm is the price taker. And then individual firm take the price under the side on the firm. And then what happens? We have D1 equal to AR1 equals to MR1 on this point. So they are all equal in there. And then what happens? We have P1 taken by the firm from the market. Remember, the firm is facing the decline in output. Remember, the law of supply will always say if ever there's a lower supply of goods, there will always be higher prices. Then we see prices are increasing from P to P1. As a result, the firm has taken the new price because the firm is the price taker, then the price is P1. And then what happens? We have the new equilibrium position where MR1 now is equal to MC. So they intersect on that point in there. Then we call it E1. And then what will happen? Then we connect the output or the quantity of goods produced by the firm that is remaining will increase from Q to Q1. There we see the quantity increasing because other firms have left the market. So remaining firms find it easy to produce even more goods. And then you can see the firm in there have just enjoyed supernormal profit because AR was greater than AC. So the graph is explained. So here is the graph. Originally, the same graph comes back. So original points are indicated. S and D create equilibrium point, which is E. There you see it there on the black. And then equilibrium price is P and equilibrium quantity is Q. Then we have those points P and Q. And then same thing applies this side on original. We have P and Q, and then original equilibrium. When firms are leaving the market or exiting the market, what happens? The exit of firms decrease the market supply. So the market supply is decreasing. Whenever the supply decreases to the left. There you see the supply declining to the left. And then it moves from S to S1. And then what happens? The new equilibrium is created at E1 and the new quantity Q1, and the price is P1 determined in there. The individual firm takes the price at P1 as a new price. So the firm is taking the price at P1 in there. You see that P1 is taken by the firm. And then at P1, existing individual firm makes economic profit since AR is above AC. Look at AC. AC is down there at P, but AR is above. So AR it remains greater than AC, then the firm enjoys supernal profit because now it is no longer facing high competition as before because other firms have left the market. They have exited the market, which have given this firm an opportunity to make supernal profit because it is now producing more output than before. Then this is the long run equilibrium. Some firms are entering, and then we illustrated the graph, while other firms decide to leave in the long run, and then we illustrated the graph indicating if firms are leaving the market, then remaining firms find themselves enjoying profits because they have to produce more goods due to the decrease in competition. So you must be able to draw these graphs, interpret them, and be able to explain conditions under which those equilibrium positions occur. You must know those conditions. And then now we move the focus to the imperfect market. Remember, imperfect market occurs when perfect market conditions are not met. So that is the imperfect market. Under imperfect market, we talk about the likes of monopoly, oligopoly, and the monopolistic. That are the part of the imperfect market that will be discussed as we go on. But today, the main focus is on the monopoly. So imperfect markets. So imperfect markets do not meet the basic standards, and then of a hypothetical perfect market or purely competitive market. So it doesn't meet conditions for the perfect market. That's why we call it imperfect market. Imperfect market are characterized by having competition for market share. So they compete for consumers the most, and then there are high barriers to entry, and then different or unique products are produced. At times, you come across homogeneous products that are produced, especially on the oligopolies. And then, as well as small number of sellers, basically buyers and sellers, but we focus on sellers. Sellers are lower in the market because of there are some barriers that exist, especially on the monopoly and oligopoly. Monopolistic is having open, but that will be discussed on its own. Market structure that are categorized. They include the likes of monopolies, oligopolies, monopolistic competition. They are the ones that will be discussed under the imperfect market structure. So we have the monopoly, which exists if there is only one seller that supplies the unique product for the entire industry. That's a monopoly. We have oligopoly that exists if ever there are few large firms that are existing and many buyers. So there are only few large firms that are existing in the market to supply either homogeneous products or differentiated products. So that's the oligopoly. And then we have the monopolistic, which exists if there are many buyers and sellers which exist in the market, with them having the control or influence over the price. So that's how it differs from the perfect market. They have a control or the influence over the price. That is the monopolistic. Then we continue with the imperfect market. So how do imperfect market structures affect consumer and economic welfare? Remember, if we are talking about the imperfect market structure, we talk about situations whereby firms have a control over the price. We talk about whereby firms can apply collusion under what we call oligopolies. We talk about situations whereby firms can restrict output by doing what? By increasing prices. So those conditions will always affect consumers. So let's see on how it affects social welfare and economic welfare. Control over prices result to consumer exploitation to higher prices. If ever firms have a power to set their very own prices, not following market signals or market forces, they have a tendency of setting higher prices. So they exploit consumers. It is bad for social welfare because some consumers do not afford the product. This decreases social welfare and increases the level of poverty to the marginalized. So some people find themselves not affording the product. As a result, poverty will try to increase further, which will reduce living standard for the marginalized. And then less or minimum consumer choices compromise social welfare. Remember, under some imperfect market structures, consumer choice is not unlimited, but it's limited. Like monopoly is serving only one seller, meaning consumers are not having any choice or alternative to choose from. Therefore, this compromises consumer welfare because they cannot choose. They are forced to demand the product from the only supplier that is existing within the market. So, barriers to entry and less market competition decrease efficiency, innovation, and quality of goods and services. If ever there are barriers to entry that are there to prohibit a market entry or the entry of new businesses, that result to existing businesses finding it unnecessary to be innovative and creative. Therefore, there will always be inefficiency within the economy because there is no much competition or there is no competition at all. So, firms will not be innovative. they will even produce poor quality of goods and services within the economy. That will simply compromise social welfare because consumers will be having access to deficient goods and services. Imperfect market information result to buyers making improper decisions. So they make improper economic decisions, and the market and the market less accessible to new entrants. If ever the market is not accessible to new entrants, and at the same time we have what we call imperfect market information. This information, remember, it becomes a barrier to entry. If it becomes a barrier to entry to new entrants, that's a problem because that will lead to new firms not entering the market. At the same time, if ever there is no enough information within the imperfect market, that leads to buyers not making proper decisions on buying goods because sometimes they are not well informed about where to find the product. How much is the product? They might find themselves being exploited because they don't know how much is the market price since firms are deciding their own prices. So this compromises consumers. At the same time, consumers find themselves being very much inefficient because they waste their financial resources as they demand the product that sometimes does not suit their lifestyle because maybe ingredients are not good for them and they are not provided at the same time. So consumers find themselves wasting their financial resources by demanding goods that they will not be using. As a result, social welfare will be compromised because of it. Collusive behavior by oligopolies through illegal measures and price fixing limit competition and compromises consumer freedom of choice. If ever firms decide to merge and become one firm, that will reduce competition for consumers. Remember, reduce the choice for consumers. So remember, consumers will need to always have a choice. So there must always be competitors where consumers will compare prices and look at the quality of goods. But if firms decide to merge and become one firm, that lead to less competition within the industry or within the market. So that compromise consumers because they find themselves with limited choices in the economy. As a result, the freedom of choice will be compromised. That is bad. So these are the bad effects of the imperfect market structures within the society. What about the economy? How does imperfect market structures affect the economy negatively? Market share competition result to anti-competitive practices. So, if ever firms are competing over consumers, they even end up applying the anti-competitive strategies or practices that will make them to even get more consumers over their competitors. At times, they become more unethical. They use false advertising as they advertise their goods in the market to attract consumers, only to find that those prices are not the one, those goods are not the one. When they advertise, they will be saying maybe there's a sale of maybe 50%. You get there, they tell you is up to 50%. Then, as a consumer, you have been misled because they are trying to attract your attention. That is because of whenever firms are fighting over consumers. Less output size by monopolies and oligopolies prevent opportunities for employment, international competitiveness, as well as economic growth. If ever there is a less competition within the market, the likes of oligopoly with few large firms and the likes of what we call monopoly without any competition, it prevents opportunities for job opportunities because remember, if there are more firms in the economy, there will always be job creation for people that are unemployed. Also, local firms find it difficult to compete, or our local goods find it difficult to compete internationally because now they are not open or facing that wild competition that can make them to be efficient and to develop. So they cannot easily compete internationally. And then that will compromise economic growth because if there are few firms producing products, there will be relatively less output available within the economy. The government intervention in monopolies prevent economic efficiency and foreign investment. Remember, if within the economy there is too much government intervention, obvious investors are always pessimistic on investing in that particular economy. So if ever government intervenes maximally to control these monopolies, foreign investors find it difficult to come and invest in our South African economy because they don't like to invest in the economy where there is too much government intervention or control. And then now, the monopoly. So we're talking about the imperfect markets globally, all of them. Now we focus on the monopoly. Remember, the monopoly exists if ever there's only one firm that is available in the market to produce the unique product for the entire market. So a monopoly exists when there is only one seller of a unique product who supply the entire market or the whole market. There will be one firm existing. That only firm existing is responsible to produce goods and supply the entire market because there is no other firm that is allowed to enter and compete in that particular market. You talk about electric industry in South Africa. Eskom is the main supplier of electricity without any competitor. The monopoly market is not accessible to new firms, so the entry is blocked. New firms are not able to enter and compete in the market. The market entry is completely blocked because there is only one firm that's existing. The monopolist firm makes supernormal profit in both short run and long run. Yes, remember the firm is the only supplier of a very important product. Therefore, the firm will make supernormal profit in both short run and the long run. But the question is it possible for the monopolist firm to make normal profit or economic loss? It is possible. It, however, does make economic loss if average cost exceed its average revenues. The monopoly can make what we call economic loss if its average costs are more than average revenues or total costs are more than total revenues. The product or service produced by a monopoly does not have any perfect substitute. The product is unique, cannot easily be replaced. So it does not contain any perfect substitute. Those are products produced or supplied by monopolies. Then examples of monopolies in South Africa, we talk about DBS, the Diamond Selling Organization. We talk about South African breweries, even though there are some other firms that are existing, smaller firms, but SAP remains the bigger firm in there. We have Eskom that is supplying electricity alone. We have Denel or Armsco that is producing weapons in South Africa or firearms. And then we have Transnet, which provide rail transport in South Africa. So these are our examples for monopolies in the country. And then types of monopolies. We have three of them: the natural, the artificial, and the local. So here we will give a depth discussion because normally you come across the examination asking you to give a difference between the two, natural monopoly and artificial monopoly. These ones are common in the examination. So what are the natural monopoly? How do they occur? Natural monopoly is a type of monopoly that exists typically due to high startup cost, meaning there is high capital required for the firm to be established. Or there will be economic of scale, meaning the firm will be producing at the lower cost, large quantity, and selling at the lower cost. These two alone prevent the entry of new businesses. These two alone become barriers to entry within the monopoly market under natural monopoly, because if ever there is more capital required for the firm to be established in the market, that will mean smaller firms cannot enter and compete in the market. At the same time, if ever the firm within the market is producing at the economic of scale or large scale production, that means the firm is producing at the lower cost, the firm is producing large output or large quantity and sell at the lower cost. Then smaller firms cannot afford to compete with this firm because this firm is selling at the lower cost and they produce at the diseconomic of scale as they enter the market. They produce at the higher cost, they will be selling at the higher cost. They produce lower output. That will lead to them not being able to enter the market and compete with this monopoly firm. That is because of economic of scale. So this becomes barriers to entry for firms that are willing to enter and compete with the firm under the natural monopoly. Natural monopoly are allowed when a single firm can supply the product or service at a lower cost than any other potential competitor, but are often heavily regulated to protect consumers. Like you see, Eskom in South Africa is regulated to protect consumers because consumers should not be exploited to higher prices of electricity. Therefore, in the Eskom is the one that is responsible to supply electricity for the entire electric industry in the country. There is no other commodity that is available so far to supply electricity. So it becomes that kind of the monopoly, which is the natural monopoly. A company with a natural monopoly is the only provider of a product or service in the industry. It does not have any competitor. It is the only provider or supplier of a unique or particular product within the economy. We continue with the natural monopoly. Natural monopolies can also arise when one firm is much more efficient than multiple competitors that are willing to compete. So if the firm is very much efficient to the point that it can be able to supply the entire market, the firm can become what we call the natural monopoly, because it will force other firms out due to the fact that it is producing at the economic of scale, while they are producing at the diseconomic of scale. A good example of this is the business of electricity transmission, where once a grid is set up to deliver electric power to the country. So in this case, I've said example that Eskom is the only supplier of electric in South Africa. And then how can the natural monopolies be formed? Remember, like we've spoken about barriers to entry in there that are natural based on the economy. They are not artificial. You talk about economic of scale. When you are producing more than the competitor, that will mean you'll be selling at the lower cost. Then you are forcing that competitor not to be able to easily compete with you. Therefore, those firms will leave the market because they cannot have much capacity to produce or compete with the existing firm that is producing at the large scale production or that is producing at the economic of scale. So, firstly, it occurs when a company takes advantage of an industry, high barriers to entry to create the moat or protective wall around what you call business operations. And then the other condition, high barriers to entry are often due to significant amount of capital required for the firm in order to buy its fixed asset to operate. So if ever there would be large capital required, that alone will formulate what we call natural monopolies because there will be one firm that is willing to enter and produce the product, while other firms are not willing to the fact that they don't have enough capital. Secondly, it occurs where producing at the larger scale is so much more efficient than small scale production that a single larger producer is sufficient to satisfy available market demand. So when one firm can produce at the economic of scale, that firm can be able to supply the entire market because it is producing at the lower cost, producing large output and selling at the lower cost. Then that firm is good enough to supply the entire market. That's how artificial monopoly can be created. So because their costs are high, small scale producers cannot simply compete with larger scale producers. So these firms that are producing at a lower output and producing at the higher cost cannot simply intervene or enter and compete with these larger scale producers because now these firms are selling at the lower cost within the market, while these smaller firms will always be selling at the higher cost. So the competition will not be fair. Therefore, they will be forced not to enter the market because they are facing the strategic industry or strategic firm that is existing to produce or to supply the entire market with that particular product. And then the opposite is artificial monopoly. So we say artificial monopoly exists when obstacles to the market entry of other firms are not economic in nature. So in this case, we mean barriers to entry that are there are not economic in nature. They are not natural. They are not of economic of scale. They are not of the firm being able to afford the capital, the higher capital that is required to cover the fixed cost in order to buy capital or machines. But how does it happen? There are some of the strategies that exist in here that will be discussed. This means that artificial monopolies exist because regulations are created to prevent entry of new firms. So there are some regulations that exist to prevent the new firms from entering the market. The startup cost or the capital might not be lower to block, might not be higher to block the new entry of other competitors. But patents or licensing allow firms to become single producers of the product within the entire market. So the patent, remember, if ever the firm is given the patent by the government, that means the firm is holding on the right to be the only supplier of the product within the market for the given period of time. No other firm can enter and compete because there is only one firm that has been given the right. We call those things exclusive rights. We talk about in there again copyrights that prevent other firms from entering the market to produce the particular product. So those are barriers to entry that form what we call artificial monopolies. So they are not formed naturally. These barriers to entry are not natural, but they are artificial. They are not economic in nature, but they are created through regulations. And then if we talk about businesses in pharmacy, most of them you can find that the business is owning a right to be the main supplier of the particular drug that was developed. So one firm finds itself being the only supplier of a particular drug. In that case, that firm will be a monopoly, but not natural, artificially, because it is protected through patents. It is protected through copyright, protected through what we call an exclusive right. So it is not natural. There are some restrictions that are in place to prevent other firms from entering the market. It does not occur just because the firm is good enough to be the supplier of the product, but it occurs because the firm is protected through barriers to entry that are artificial, not natural. How are artificial monopolies formed? Artificial monopoly can be formed or take advantage in production efficiency over small firms but nonetheless manages to drive out competitors. So it has a power to drive out other competitors in the business so that they can remain as only suppliers. How do they drive out these suppliers? They are protected by these barriers to entry, such as patents, exclusive rights. So those are barriers to entry and copyright. They prevent the entry of new businesses. Then the firm remain the only supplier of the particular product without any competitor. Some businesses become artificial monopolies through buying out competitors. So other firms are very simple on buying out other firms or competitors that are trying to enter and compete. They buy them out or they make them, then these firms will be out of the market, then the firm will remain as a dominant firm. It will dominate the market alone without any competitor because it is using these restrictions that are artificial to prevent the entry of new businesses. Artificial monopolies are therefore formed through licensing or patents. There will be patents or licenses that will be given to firm to be the main supplier of the product without any competitor for the given period of time, which legally makes a supplier the only producer of a particular product for the given period. The firm can become the only supplier of the product because of the patent, maybe for 20 years. That alone prevent the entry of new businesses because the formal document prevent the firm from doing what? Prevent other firms from entering the market. So the patent is the document that is legally to allow a particular firm to be the only supplier of a particular product for the given period of time. We call that the patent. And then the local monopoly. So the local monopoly is different from what we call an artificial and natural. So local monopoly exists in a smaller scale when in a particular region when there is only supplier of a particular product. So under local monopoly, we talk about the geographical areas in there. In a particular area, there is the only supplier of the product, but there are suppliers of the product in other places. For instance, there can be a doctor in a particular region, the only doctor being available in the particular region. But in other regions, there are doctors. So within that particular region, the doctor is the local monopoly because he or she is the only supplier of that particular product without any competitor. So local monopolies are created based on location or geographical areas where they don't have competitors around them. That's why we talk about regions in there. There are no restrictions or barriers to entry into the market, but geographical area makes a particular service provider a monopoly if he or she does not have any competition. So in the particular area, there is this general doctor. That general doctor is the only doctor, the only doctor available in that area. In other regions, there are doctors. So locally, the doctor is a monopoly because he or she does not have a competitor. For example, a medical doctor can be a monopoly if he or she is the only service provider in a particular region. There are no competitors that are supplying that particular product or service in there. Then the local monopoly is created. And then we are done with what you call types of monopolies. Remember, we have natural monopoly, artificial monopoly, and local monopoly. Natural monopoly is protected by barriers to entry that are very much natural. And these these what we call barriers to entry are economic of scale and high capital required to establish the business, which prevent other firms from entering the market. And then artificial monopoly, it exists because barriers to entry are not economic in nature. So they are not natural. They are just created to prevent the entry of new businesses. We talk about those patents and exclusive rights given to the firm to be the only supplier of the product. Now, the cost and revenues. So as we approach cost and revenues, we are simply discussing average cost, marginal cost, total revenue, marginal revenue, average revenue. We are discussing them under the perfect market. So the first one we're discussing what we call marginal revenue or marginal revenue itself. We know that the marginal revenue, as for the monopoly, is not the same as average revenue in the perfect market. The perfect market is having the same average revenues, which is the same as marginal revenue. But in this case, under the monopoly, marginal revenue differs from average revenue. It always lies below average revenue because they are not equal. They are only equal on the first point of intersection there, on what you call on your top left. And then as they go down, they separate and split. The monopoly's marginal revenue from each unit sold does not remain constant, as in this case, or in the case of perfect market. So it does not remain constant. Under the perfect market, it remains constant, but here it does not remain constant. It changes as the firm produces or supply more. The firm will always decrease the price, which will decrease what we call the marginal revenue for the firm. The monopoly is facing the downward sloping market demand curve, indicating that for any additional units sold, prices must be lowered. The demand curve there is downward sloping. It indicates that for any extra units sold, the price should be reduced. And then, so the price that monopolies can get for each additional unit of output must fall as the monopolies increase the output. For the monopoly to increase the output, the price must fall or must be reduced. Consequently, the monopoly's marginal revenue will also be falling as the monopolies increase the output. If the monopoly is increasing output or supplying more or producing more, and then that will mean the marginal revenue will be reduced because for the monopoly to increase the output, it decreases the price. As the price decreases, that reduces what we call the marginal revenue for the firm. And then the monopoly's MR lies below AR. The marginal revenue for the monopoly is always lying below average revenue. Why does it happen like that? Unlike in the perfect market, in perfect market, average revenue or AR and marginal revenue curves are two separate curves. They are not the same. They meet once on the first point and they separate going down. And then MR will always cut the horizontal axis in the middle. If it cuts them down there, it is positioned in there. Then AR will be floating down as a downward sloping demand curve because in the AR refers to the demand. The marginal revenue curve is negatively sloped. It is sloping downward and lies below average revenue curve, except on the first top left unit where they are equal. On the first top left unit, they are all equal, but as they go down, sloping down, they separate. They are both downward sloping. The reason for the marginal revenue curve lying below average revenue is that the firm must reduce the price if it wants to sell additional units. For the firm to produce or to sell more units, the price should be lowered by the firm. As a result, that decreases the marginal revenue even more than average revenue. Remember, marginal revenue happens to be equal to zero if the firm is existing, but average revenue cannot be zero if the firm is still producing and existing. Marginal revenues earned from the sale of additional units will always be lower than average revenues earned. That's why you won't have average revenue being equal to the marginal revenue in the same curve. They are separated. They are equal at the first point, but they separate as they slope downward. And then you find MR being lower than AR at all times. It lies below. Average revenue cannot be zero. Like I said, it cannot be zero average revenue for the firm, while marginal revenue can be zero at the point where it cuts horizontal axis halfway, and even lower, it can even be below zero. If ever it goes below horizontal axis, MR will be negative, meaning it will be lower than zero. But average revenue doesn't get below zero, doesn't get to be zero if the firm is still producing something. Then this is our marginal revenue and average revenue. So we say average revenues is the same as the demand curve. It is downward sloping, and then what happens with it? It starts from our top left to the bottom right. So it is negatively sloping, indicating that the increase in what we call in the price, the output will be reduced, and the decrease in price, the output will be increased. That will be indicated along the AR equals to the curve. And then we continue. We have this curve, which is MR. Then you will see what happens. I said they are equal on the original point. Yes, they are equal. You can see they are both equal here on the initial point. And they slope downward, they separate going down, and marginal revenue will always cut horizontal axis in the middle between AR as well as what you call the vertical axis. So from this point to this point, you have your what you call MR cutting horizontal axis in the middle. So it slopes downward and cut horizontal in the middle in there. So you can see that these curves are not the same. They differ. They are equal in there, but they separate as they go down. As they go down, MR always lies below AR, and AR remains higher than MR in that case. And then explanation. MR curve is negative sloping, downward sloping. It is always below AR curve. As you see, it is below here. They are only equal on the point. This decreases, as the output increases, the price will decrease. So the firm will always decrease the price to increase its output. Then that will always decrease what we call the marginal revenue. Then marginal revenue curve lies below the average revenue curve, as you see in here. AR is the same as the demand curve for the monopolies. It is downward sloping, indicating effect of the price. The price changes to the quantities. If ever there is a change in price and the change in quantity, it is indicated along the AR curve. And then MR simply lies below the AR curve because they are not equal in there. MR is always lower. So normally this question comes for 4 marks to say, why does MR curve always lie below the AR curve under the monopoly? You need to be able to answer that question for any mark that is possible. Remember, for the firm to produce or to produce more output or to sell an additional unit, the price should be reduced under the monopoly. That leads to marginal revenues decreasing even further. For any additional unit sold, the price must be lowered. That will be indicated along the AR curve or demand curve. Then the MR will always go down until it reaches 0, and it can even go beyond 0 or below 0. Average revenue curve is downward sloping, meaning it is negatively sloping. And then it is the same as curve as the demand curve. So for the monopolist firm labeled AR equals to D. It is indicated like that in there. We say average revenue equals to D, that the same curve. Demand curve decrease with increase in quantity. As prices decrease, that results to negative sloping demand curve, or what we call average revenue. And then average revenue decrease because with each subsequent additional in quantity is marginal revenue decrease, and eventually with each additional unit, the quantity in the market average revenue will always fall. And then the demand curve for the monopoly. The monopoly's demand curve is downward sloping, negatively from our top left to the bottom right. And then since the monopolist is only supplier of the whole, in the market for the entire market, its demand curve represents the entire industry. So this demand curve is for the firm, is also for whom? Is also for the entire market or the industry. It's not only for the firm. The same demand curve for the firm represents even the industry. Unlike in the perfect market where we have the demand curve for the firm and the demand curve for the industry. In this case, monopoly is facing downward sloping demand curve because the firm increases the output, it decreases the price. So for the firm to increase its output, it always decreases the price. So that is indicated along the demand curve that is downward sloping. Influence or control over the price allow monopoly to charge prices based on output it's willing to supply. So the monopoly is the price set. It can set its own prices. Does not depend on whoever to set the price. Therefore, it will always decide on which price should it sell which quantity. So it is having the control in both prices and quantity because the firm is the price set. And then the demand curve sloping downward, indicating that the change in price does not result to the huge change in quantity demanded. So it is relatively inelastic. The demand curve for the monopoly is relatively inelastic, meaning it is having a steep slope, indicating that the change in price for the firm does not result to the huge change in quantity demanded. Why? Because there's only supplier of the product. If consumers cannot demand the product from this firm, they will go without the product. Remember, the product does not have a perfect substitute. So consumers will always demand the product, regardless if the price is higher or lower. Meaning, in this case, consumer sensitiveness is very much lower because the product is supplied by one firm and the product does not have any substitute. That leads to the demand curve being relatively inelastic as it is downward sloping. The monopolist firm is the only supplier of the unique product within the market. No alternative or perfect substitutes are made available to consumers. Therefore, if consumers are not willing to demand from the monopoly, they go without the product. That makes the demand curve for the monopolist to be downward sloping, being very much steep or relatively inelastic, meaning consumers are not very much sensitive to the change in price. The demand curve for the monopoly therefore represents the monopolist firm as well as the entire market or the entire industry. This demand curve represents both the market as well as individual firm. Any change in the price and quantity is reflected along the demand curve. If ever there is a change in price or quantity, that is indicated along the demand curve for the firm under the monopoly. And then we have our demand curve in here being illustrated. We have the price and the quantity. There is the demand curve being downward sloping. We are connecting now. We said everything or any change in price and quantity is indicated along the demand curve. There you see the point there, point A, indicating the price is very high, and then the price is decreasing. The quantity will increase from Q to Q1 as the price decreases from P to P1. And then we have the point B in there. And then this is our demand curve. So in this case, you can see our demand curve is downward sloping. It is not flat, but it is a little bit steep. It is relatively inelastic. You will see once we talk about the monopolistic to say these demand curves are very much different. They are not the same. This one is relatively steeper, and the other one is very much flatter, indicating that this, in this case, the firm is the only supplier. The change in price does not affect the change in quantity demanded that much. There will be the smaller margin, meaning consumers are not very much sensitive to the change in price under the monopoly because the firm is the only supplier of the product without any perfect substitute and without any competitor. The demand curve for monopoly slope downward from top to the left. And then the original price is P, which is here, and then quantity is Q. There is Q, which is the original. And then the firm decreased the price from P to P1. There is the price decreasing from P to P1. And then what happens? To increase the output from Q to Q1, the output is increasing from Q to Q1, you see. And this is indicated on point A and point B. And then point A indicates the original price and original quantity, and point B indicates the combination of new price, which is P1, and new quantity, which is Q1. That is point B. The demand curve is downward sloping, relatively inelastic, indicating that the change in price does not lead to huge change in quantity demanded. That's why the demand curve is downward sloping, being very much steeper, not being flat as compared to the monopolistic firm. And then this is the total revenue curve. How is it being derived? And then there we go, we have our quantity, price, and total revenue. And then we have our point. Remember, our total revenue initially will increase until the point where when it is maximized. Once it's being maximized, it will start to slope downward. So let's see here. So this point at quantity number 1, our TR is equal to how much? It's 120. So you can see the original point in there, it's 70. And then quantity number 2, it's 100. There you see the point. Quantity number 3, and then it becomes 120. There it's 120. Then it is maximized. Quantity number 4, it's also 120. The firm is maximizing its total revenues here. And then quantity number 5, what happens here? And then it goes down to 100, meaning this was 100, and then it has increased, was maximized, and then it goes down to 100. Like I said before, total revenue will increase initial until it's being maximized. After being maximized, it will slope downward. And then let's see, that is our total revenue. Okay. It increased, it was positive from quantity number 1, quantity number 2, quantity number 3. And then quantity number 4, it remained at 120, and then it declined from there to 100 because it was already maximized. So the total revenue increases initially until it's being maximized. After being maximized, it slopes downward. It can even go down there to 0 if it keeps on decreasing. That is our TR or total revenue. The graph comes back as it is. TR is positive. You can see it's positive, it's upward sloping, so it's positive until this point. From quantity 1 to quantity number 3. Let's see, 1, 2, 3 is positive. There you go. And then it increased from 70 to 120. Increased from 70 to 120. It was positive in there. And then TR is maximized at quantity number 4 as it remains constant at 120. At quantity number 4, it is maximized. It's no longer increasing because it remains at 120 for both consecutive quantities. And then beyond quantity 4, TR curve starts to be downward sloping. So it starts to decrease beyond quantity number 4. At quantity 5, it is downward sloping. Down there, TR is equal to now 100. You can see it is declining. So that means the TR will always increase initially until it gets to be maximized. After being maximized, it will slope downward or it will increase. So it sloped downward to 100 in quantity number 5. So in quantity 5, it goes straight to 100 as it is decreasing. So it has already been maximized at quantity number 3 and 4 at 120 total revenue. And then here we talk about average revenue, marginal revenue, and total revenue. The relationship between them is explained in here. And then we have our demand curve, that is our total revenue. Like I've said before, remember, you know all these curves now. We have our AR equals to MR, and then we have our MR down there. So our AR equals to D, and then we have our MR there. And then our total revenues will always increase. After reaching the maximum point, it will slope downward. Then let's see. The price and the new price in there is indicated along the demand curve because it has decreased. So originally the price was P, and then the price decreased to P1, going with the quantity which was originally Q, which have increased to Q1 because of the lower price. These are our cost and revenues, and then these are our costs on the second graph and revenues, and then we have the quantity and the quantity here. And then let's see. Demand curve reflects that the higher the price, the lower is the quantity demanded, which is indicated in there. If the price is P, quantity demanded is Q, it is lower. The lower is the quantity demanded. While the lower is the price, means the higher is the quantity demanded. Whenever the price decreases to P1, the quantity demanded increases to Q1. It is indicated here. AR indicates that demand curve is the same as, is at the same curve. So AR is to D. They simply indicate that demand and AR are the same curve. MR curve lies below AR as usual. We have seen it is lying below AR. They are only equal on the initial point. MR curve cuts horizontal axis in the middle. There you see MR curve cutting horizontal axis in the middle between AR is to D as well as vertical axis. And then changes in price are reflected by the point along the demand curve. So the change in price is indicated on this point and this point. You can name it point A and point B. And then total revenue increases until it reaches its maximum. Then it declines or becomes downward sloping. So it has increased until it is maximized on this point. After being maximized on this point, actually it should be this point, and then it goes down further until it reaches 0. So, like I said before, TR will be positive until it reaches maximum point. It is maximized, and then after being maximized on this amount, then it goes down. And then the monopolist firm maximizes revenues at P1 and Q1. So the P1, which is here, and Q1, which is here, the firm maximizes its revenues. So this graph once appeared in the examination, I think it was 2020, whereby learners were supposed to explain the relationship between average revenues, total revenues, and marginal revenues graphically. So this is the graph that you should draw. So there are two graphs. You draw the first one, which is normal, and then you draw your TR below, indicating that it is positive until it is maximized. From there, it starts to be downward sloping until it reaches 0 if it continues with decline. And then average cost and average and marginal cost. Here they come. Remember, our marginal cost is our what we call neck shape projection, and then our average cost is our bowl shape. You have seen them, and then that is the point indicating that average cost will always intersect MC will always be equal to MC at its lowest point. So it is at its lowest point here. The AC is at its lowest at this point. So it intersects the marginal cost. There you see the point down there, which indicates the supply for the firm. The firm will always supply at the lowest point of the MC when it is upward sloping, then the supply begins. So explanation, MC curve is necessary as it determines if the what you call the profit maximization point for the firm, where it intersects what you call MR. So that is MC importance. And then AC curve is necessary because it's the one that assists us to determine if the firm is making economic loss or profit or normal profit, because it always turns based on revenues. And then the firm produces nothing on the downward sloping part of MC. Production begins on the upward sloping. So at this point, going down, nothing will be produced by the firm. The firm will start producing here, going up. And then average cost curve always intersects marginal cost curve on its lowest. Like I said, it cuts or intersects MC at its lowest. So meaning at this point, the AC is at its lowest, then it cuts or intersects marginal cost. And then now we approach the features or the characteristics of what we call the monopoly. How do we see monopoly? Remember, there are various features, that different ways in which monopoly can be seen or can be identified. So in this case, that will be discussed like now. So this is the possible essay as per the examination guideline. You can come across this as an essay, or you can come across equilibrium position for the perfect market as an essay. So here, we will be using the structure to explain all characteristics. Under the what we call monopoly, how many sellers do we have? And then under the monopoly, there's one seller. Like we said before, there's only one supplier of the unique product. So there's only one seller, meaning there is no competition. Only one seller exists to supply the entire market with a particular product. One seller, completely control the supply of the good or a service in the market. There's only just one seller that is existing to supply or to control the supply of the product for the whole market. Because the monopolist is the only supplier of the product in the market, the demand curve represents the individual firm and the entire market that have been discussed again, since the firm is the only supplier. For example, TBS is the only diamond seller and represents the total diamond industry, while ESCOM is the only supplier of electricity and it represents the entire electricity industry in South Africa. Nature of products. What kind of products are produced by monopolies? These products are believed to be unique or heterogeneous. They are not similar to any other product. They don't have any perfect substitute within the economy. Heterogeneous products are unique without any close substitute. They cannot either be replaced or be substituted because they are just unique. If consumers cannot find the product on the single supplier, they go without the product because there is only one supplier of the unique product in the market. This leaves consumers with no choice, so they cannot choose from who do they want to buy because there is only one supplier. So this leaves consumers without any choice based on the selling price, the quality, and the supplier. They need to buy from the only supplier which is available. You know, if ever ESCOM cannot supply you with electricity, you will wait until they provide electricity back. Consumers therefore develop the dependency on the product sold by the monopoly. So they depend mostly on that particular product supplied by the monopoly because they don't have any other choice of alternative. So control over the price. Monopolies are the price setter. Monopolies firm determine its own prices. For the firm to set the price, it look at the output it's willing to produce, and then it will set the price. Monopolies firm are the price setters because they have a control over prices. We call them price setters. Monopolies always increase their prices to decrease the output. That this has been discussed before. They increase the price to reduce the output and decrease the price to increase the output. This means that increased price result to less units produced in the market or sold in the market. And then reduce price result to more units produced. If ever prices are higher, there will be lower units produced by monopolies. If ever prices are lower, there will be more units produced or sold by monopolies. As much as the monopoly has a control over the price, it does not have a control over the demand. Remember, consumers are the ones that determine on what they demand and how they demand. The demand is therefore necessary for the firm to determine the price. So it looks at the demand as the market signal in order to set its own price. So the demand is very necessary for monopolies because it guides them on how they should supply the product and on how much should they produce, on how much should they sell the unit of the product. So the demand give them the claim or the guideline, or it becomes the market signal for them to determine if ever the price should be increased or should be reduced, to determine if ever the output should be increased or should be reduced. That is the demand alone. It is having the downward sloping demand curve. The demand curve for the monopoly has been explained. It is downward sloping from the top left to the bottom right. It is negative sloping. That is because the firm will always influence the price to also to influence what you call the output. The monopoly firm and the market are represented by the downward sloping demand curve, which is the only demand curve. The same curve represents the industry or the market as well as the firm. The demand curve for the monopoly slope downward because the firm is a price setter. It can increase prices to reduce the output size and decrease prices to increase the output size. That is indicated along the demand curve. The monopoly demand curve is relatively inelastic. This happens because products produced are unique and the market entry is blocked, meaning consumers do not have any other choice. Consumers are not sensitive to the changing price. If ever the price is increasing, consumers will keep on demanding the product because there is no alternative product that is available for them within the market. So they tend to be less sensitive to the changing price. The increase in price does not affect the quantity demanded much, which means the demand for product is relatively inelastic. So the demand for the product is relatively inelastic. If ever the price is increasing, consumers will always demand, but there might be a smaller margin of exchange, but they will keep on demanding the product because it does not have a perfect substitute, cannot be replaced easily. There are high barriers to entry. So the entry in this market is not freely accessible. It is blocked. New firms are not easily free to enter the market. It is blocked by barriers to entry, such as patents, economic of scale. We talk about high capital or startup costs, and then exclusive rights, ownership of some natural resources that prevent other firms from entering the market. Market entry is completely blocked to new firms. New firms cannot enter the market while existing firms cannot leave the market. If ever Eskom is willing to leave the market, it will not be easy because it is the only supplier that is supplying electricity, which is very important for the economy. The market is protected by barriers to entry to prohibit the entry of new businesses. So other businesses that are willing to enter cannot easily enter the market because of barriers to entry. Barriers to entry such as patents, startup cost, which is very high for capital, licensing, copyrights, economic of scale, make it hard for new businesses to enter the market because these barriers to entry prohibit the entry of those other businesses that are possible potential competitors. As a result, competition does not exist in the market. If a firm is a pure monopoly, for the pure monopolies, there is no competition at all. The firm is the only supplier of a unique product. There is no consumer choice. Consumers in here are not having any choice. So that means consumers are obliged to demand the product from the only supplier that is available within the market. Consumer choice is limited. The market does not provide any alternative for consumers. Consumers may demand from existing firms or go without the product. So as a consumer in this kind or in the situation of the monopoly, you go without the product or you demand from the monopoly. And then since the product is not easily replaceable, the failure of the market to supply the product results to unavailability of the product in the market. If ever the firm cannot supply the product, and then the product will not be available in the market completely. Efficiency. In this case, monopolies can try to be efficient. However, they find no incentive to improve themselves because they don't have any competition. So the market output is relatively small caused by no competition. Since the firm is the only supplier of the unique product in the entire market, inefficiency is okay. That can be under supply of the product. For instance, Eskom is the only supplier of electricity in South Africa. Technical problems in the monopoly result to power supply reduction. So that's because the firm is the only supplier, so it is inefficient. Productive inefficiency is possible in a monopoly, but generally unlikely. because there is no incentive for the firm to improve its efficiency since it is the only supplier without any competition. And then allocative inefficiencies occur in the monopoly firm. If the monopoly firm is unable to supply the optimum quantity that is demanded by consumers within the market, then allocative inefficiency will prevail there. Now, we shift the focus to 3 equilibrium positions. So in this case, we'll be talking about the supernormal profit, economic loss, and the normal profit in both the short run and the long run. Remember, the monopoly, we said it makes the supernormal profit in both short run and the long run. Monopoly's firm can make supernormal profit in both short run and the long run because the firm is believed to be the only supplier of the unique product, meaning all consumers buy from the firm. This market condition can prevail if average revenues are more than average cost of doing the business. And then the entire market share belong to one firm. So all consumers within the market belong to one firm. Therefore, the firm is believed to be making supernormal profit in both short run and long run. However, the firm can make economic loss. If average cost exceeds average revenue or total cost exceeds total cost, the firm will make economic loss. It is possible for the firm to do that. And then there are high prices in there. Consumers are exposed to higher prices because the firm is the one that determines the price. It will always increase the price to restrict the output. Monopoly export consumers to higher prices, and then fewer products are made available at higher prices. And then monopolies firm easily ask for higher prices because it does not have a competitor. This results to products made available only for those who can afford, while disadvantaged people cannot access the product. So this leads to the product being accessible to only those that can afford it because prices tend to be higher. There is a complete information in the market for both consumers and producers. They all know all prevailing market conditions. Monopoly has a high degree of transparency as there is no incentive for hiding information from consumers because there is no competitor. Consumers need to buy the product at the end of the day. Asymmetric information does not exist in the monopoly. Buyers and sellers are not having different information. They have a common information about the product, pricing, and the of the market. So there is no asymmetric or different information in the monopoly. The market information is complete or perfect or adequate. There is no collusion because the firm is the only supplier of the product. So collusion will be unreasonable because the firm is the only producer. So collusion occurs when 2 or more firms meet to discuss price fixing or production techniques. But in this case, there's only one supplier. So implicit or explicit collusion does not occur in this case. The entire market is dominated by a single supplier without any rivalries. Therefore, collusion cannot occur. The monopolist does not have any competitor to collude with, which means collusion is irrelevant and impossible in this kind of the market. And then we talk about the profit and loss. So you can be asked in a form of an essay to discuss equilibrium position for the firm under the monopoly. Then it is very important you know how to draw and explain economic profit, normal profit, and economic loss. They've been discussed under the perfect market, but condition will come back again. Economic profit prevails when revenues are greater than the cost incurred in the business. Then that will lead to the economic profit. If average revenues are more than average cost, or total revenues are more than total cost, it is also regarded as supernormal profit or abnormal profit. Average cost curve tends below average revenue, meaning the firm is making supernormal profit. Average revenues exceed average cost, meaning AR is more than AC. In that case, the firm will be making supernormal profit. Or total revenues will be more than total cost. The firm will be making a supernormal profit. The economic profit conditions indicate that more revenues are earned after sales as compared to costs that incurred during the production process of the product. And then economic profit can be calculated in 2 ways that are following. AR minus AC times quantity, or open the bracket, AR times Q, close the bracket, open the bracket, minus AC times Q, and then close the bracket, which simply means total revenue minus total cost, because this is to derive total revenue and total cost. Then that's when we get the profit or a loss for the firm. So this is the graph. Normally, we are familiar with these 2 curves. Now we need to indicate if the firm is making a profit or a loss. Now, in this case, we have our marginal cost, which is MC, and then we need AC to be positioned. Remember, for the firm to make a supernormal profit in this case, the average cost curve should be turning below average revenue. So these are revenues for the business on the tangent here. They are equal to 150, and then the costs are equal to 90. As a result, the firm is making the supernormal profit because average revenues are above average cost, and shaded area indicates supernormal profit in there. And then there's a point in there where MR equals to MC, which indicate the profit maximization. There you go. In the interpretation, point E indicate the profit maximization where MR equals to MC. The firm make economic profit because AR is more than AC. You can see AR here, there is AR. It is more, it's 150, then AC is lower, it's 90. Then the firm is making supernormal profit. And then shaded area indicates economic profit. There is shaded area indicating that this distance is for the supernormal profit. So the profit is calculated as AR minus AC times Q, which is 150, which is this one, revenue, minus 90 times the quantity, which is 150 minus times 110. This is the quantity. Then it's 6,600. The firm is enjoying supernormal profit. And then economic loss condition. Economic loss will always prevail if ever average costs are more than average revenues. So in this case, the average costs are turning above average revenues curve. And then what happens again? Economic loss also prevails if total cost is more than total revenues of doing the business. The economic loss condition indicates that less revenues are earned after sales. And then we continue. And then conditions continue. If a firm faces economic loss, no gain has been earned by the firm on its operation, but it has just made a loss. And then this generally means that expenses of the firm are more than income earned by the firm after sales. So that is the economic loss condition. Under this condition, the firm decides either to continue with its operation or it leave the market. It decides depending on the depth of economic loss. Economic loss can be calculated in these two ways. We say loss equals to AR minus AC times Q, or loss equals to TR minus TT, which is generated in this formula. And then this is the economic loss indicated here. And then let's see, MC comes in with the labeling as usual. And then you see as MC intersect MR, we maximize profit in that point, and then we continue. AC comes into indicating the firm is making economic loss or profit. Then we can see the firm is making economic loss because our AC is turning above AR. Look at AR, it is here. Then AC is above. That means revenues are equal to 100, costs are equal to 200. Then the firm is making economic loss. As a result, that is the shaded area indicating economic loss for the business. And then point E indicates profit maximization point. And then the firm makes economic loss because average costs are more than average revenues. You can see average cost equals to 200, average revenues equals to 100. Average cost turns above average revenues. Then AC are turning just above that. That means if they turn above revenues, which are here, then the firm is making economic loss. Shaded area indicates the supernormal profit. Then the economic, indicate economic loss because you can see costs are turning above. As a result, you can see the profit is calculated, it becomes negative 6,000 because AR minus 80 times Q equal to 100 times 200, minus 200 times 60 equals to negative 6,000, meaning the firm have a loss of negative 6,000. Then the firm is making economic loss because average revenues are lower than average cost, or average costs are greater than average revenues. Then the normal profit. Normal profit prevails when revenues are equal to cost of doing the business, and then average cost tends along or on the average revenue curve. And then average revenues are equal to average cost, or total revenues are equal to total cost. So this occurs. AR is equals to AC, or TR equals to TT. The firm is making a normal profit or break even. The normal profit condition indicates that the revenues earned are equal to the cost incurred in the production process of the business. And then we continue. The normal profit is also known as a break even. We say the firm is breaking even if it's making normal profit because it's not either making a profit or a loss. No gain and no loss. These are minimum earnings that prevent the firm from leaving the market. The firm will always stay in there because it's not making a loss, neither a profit. Normal profit indicates that the firm income earned is equal to expenses incurred in the business. Normal profit can be calculated as follows. We say normal profit equal to AR minus AC times Q, or normal profit equal to TR minus TC, which is generated in this formula, which is open the bracket AR times Q, close the bracket, minus open the bracket AC times Q, close the bracket, you get your TR and your TC. And then this is our normal profit coming in. So we already have MC in there. Let's see. We're looking for AC. AC turns straight along or turns on the AR. You can see it simply turns on the point here. So this indicates normal profit because if you can check our revenues are equal to 300 on the tangent here. And our costs are turning straight on the point, meaning revenues are equal to 300 and the costs are also 300. Therefore, the firm is making a normal profit. This point E there indicates the profit maximization point in there. So our output is 100. And then point E, as usual, indicate the profit maximization where MR equal to MC. The firm makes normal profit because AC equals to AR or TC equals to TR. And then AC turns along or turns on the AR. Profit is calculated AR minus AC times 2, 300 minus 300 times 100 equals to 0. And then you can see firm is making a normal profit. So that there is no profit, neither a loss. We call this one the break even. The firm is breaking even. And then this is the assessment on the monopoly. The question was from the December 2020 final exam. Draw a full level graph to show the economic laws or show the economic laws in the monopoly market structure. How can it be drawn? There is the graph for the economic laws. You can see these are our revenues that are equal to 8, and then our costs are equal to 10. Then the firm is making economic loss in that case because you can see our AC is turning just above our AR. So the firm is making economic loss. And then let's see how marks were allocated. Okay, again, we have draw the full level graph show economic loss. So let's see explanation. Mark allocation, they go as follows: correct what you call excess. So for quantity and the price, there is a mark for that. So it's one mark for both if you label your axis. And then correct drawing positioning of the AC is one mark. If AC is turning on the right position here, it gives you a mark. But if it turns on the wrong position, there is no mark for that. And then correct drawing positioning of the AC curve and labeling is one mark. So positioning our AC is the one mark, MC is one mark. And then also, let's check the allocation. Correct drawing positioning of the MR curve. If MR is correctly drawn, it gives you a mark. So this simply guides you on how you should be drawing your graph. Correct drawing or positioning of the labeling of AR. If it's labeled correctly, that gives you a mark. So loss minimization equals to 1 mark. And then indication of profit, which is the shaded area, is 2 marks. So you can see how marks were provided here for you to get the maximum mark. It was 8 marks if I'm not mistaken. And then correct labeling of axis is 1 mark. And then the maximum mark was 8 marks in for this graph. So ensure that all of these things that are indicated here, you are able to provide them here correctly in your graph. The second assessment example. With the age of graph, explain the relationship between marginal revenue and the demand, AR, on the monopoly, November, December 2021, which was last year. This is the question that came out in the examination. Then let's see. This is what was supposed to be drawn. You can see the demand curve and AR turning below the demand curve or AR, and then MR is below what you call AR, and then they are all equal at the initial point. And then you must always make sure that you have your heading provided, you label your axis, you label your curve. That provides you an opportunity to get your maximum marks because it was only 4 marks. And then there is the graph. Marginal revenue curve, with the exception of the first unit, will lie below what we call the demand curve or average cost curve. So you can see it is lying below, besides the original point. And then we continue in explanation. The demand curve AR is negative sloping. You can see it's downward sloping, which results to more goods being sold at the lower price. You can see if ever the price is decreasing, more goods will be sold like this. And then hence the additional revenue will decrease. So marginal revenues will always be lower because for the firm to sell extra unit, they must decrease the price, which decrease marginal revenue to be always lower than what you call the average revenue. MR curve intersects the horizontal axis at a point halfway between original and AR curve. You can see it intersected halfway in there, like it was explained during the content explanation. And then the monopolist will always set the price above point A. This is point A, so the price will always be set above point A on AR curve because marginal revenue will be positive. And then our lesson ends here. I thank you. I believe this lesson will have a greater impact as you prepare for any upcoming assessment. Thank you. Enjoy your preparation.